All right. It appears that we have a quorum, at least on Zoom here. I'm having issues with my audio, so I'm on two lines here, so you guys will have to bear with me. Hopefully that doesn't mess things up as far as seeing my face and my lips and then hearing it through the audio portion, but we'll just look away if you have to. I would like to call the Village of Cottage Grove Board of Trustees meeting to order on June 1st. This is a Zoom meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and anything that occurs in the meeting will be recorded. We'll start with roll call from Lisa, please.
All right, Alan.
Aye.
Lindberg. Murphy.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Valencia.
Here.
Vandervelde.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
And I saw Jeff earlier.
I did as well. So
Maybe he's on mute.
he may have the same issue I have. It looks like he's only got video, and the video's off. So he may be having an issue there.
Okay.
If you want to try him in the chat, maybe, while we forge ahead. So as I said, this is a Zoom meeting for the Village of Cottage Grove. We are holding this due to the pandemic. You can access it through the agenda. At the top of the agenda, there is a link for the Zoom meeting through your smartphone or phone or computer, tablet, or etc. Or there's also an audio number in there as well as with a meeting ID that you can use in order to access it via only audio. What is chatted or on the video or audio is recorded because we do collect that information from open meetings law. So hopefully we don't have any more issues with the system here. So we will start the meeting with we do have a quorum, and the agenda was properly posted, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 is public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. So if you are public, please make sure you unmute, share your name and address, and provide the feedback that you would like to the village board. And we respectfully ask that is maintained to about 3 minutes, so that if we have multiple presenters or speakers, they all get a chance to voice their opinion. So I'll pause and allow anybody to jump in.
How do I mute this now?
All right. Moving on then. Item 5, yes?
Hey, John. Hey, John. Hey, John, this is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, great. I'm here now.
Thank you. Thank you for persevering. I think you may have had the same issue I had.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but hopefully we can get back to doing live in a couple weeks. This is back in normal instead of this. All right.
All right, thank you. So then we'll move on to item 5, is discuss and consider the meeting minutes from our regular village board meeting on May 18th, 2020. Is there any discussion, corrections, or edits in the minutes?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what's at 9A for the motion for Paul Vandervelde to be on the committees. It should also include, because it states, motion to approve the appointment of Van Velde to the committees listed and ad hoc architectural, because that wasn't listed on the list of committees to put him on.
Yes, and that was the motion to good catch, Melissa, to add that one.
I'll move to approve with that addition.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, there. Seconded by Troy. I think he beat the other person out just by a bit. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 6 is unfinished business. The first of that, A, is discuss and consider Resolution 2020-05 regarding the resolution awarding the sale of $1.85 million in general obligation park and public grounds bonds, Series 2020A. There was an email earlier today from Matt indicating the value was $1.82 million and not $1.5 million. So I think Greg Johnson's in the meeting and may want to just provide an update on that sale.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and kind of go through our sale day report, so you can kind of see that as well. So just to recap, this bond issue was authorized by the village board last month to fund some of your splash pad, shelter, and other improvements. We conducted the bond sale this morning. You'll see here up on the screen is kind of an executive summary. We received a total of 4 bids. The winning bid was submitted by BOK Financial Securities out of Milwaukee with a true interest cost of 1.8132%. In terms of the total principal and interest over the 20-year life of the bonds, that's $2,179,367. That came in $136,272 less than the estimate that we had presented to the village board last month. So included in our sale day report was kind of the bid tabulations that summarize the results from all 4 of the bidders. So that's included for reference. I do want to kind of walk through the details of the sale. So here we have the financing plan. The amount of bonds that were authorized last month were $1,850,000. Based on the final results from the bond sale today, we're able to downsize the bond issue. So you still have the same amount for project costs. You just had to issue less bonds to pay for them, which is a good thing. So you'll see we had estimated $1,850,000. The final par amount is $1,820,000. So the cost of issuance came in a little less than we had anticipated, which is a good thing. So in terms of the tax impact analysis, this is kind of what we went through last month when we presented the pre-sale report. Off on the far left-hand side is all of the existing general obligation debt service payments of the village. The village budgets revenue from its TIF districts and its utilities to pay a portion of its general obligation debt service. So that's all summarized here on the far left-hand side under existing debt. Then we have the proposed bonds that you're considering this evening. So again, you'll see the total principal and interest for the bond issue and how that came in $136,272 less than the estimate. The tax levy change from 2020 to 2021 is pretty much right at the level that we had shown last month. Came in about 115,000. That's a little less than what we had in the financial management plan a year ago. So kind of trying to keep that levy target consistent. So we're able to, there was a premium bid submitted, so the village gets some money deposited into its debt service fund. That allowed us to increase the principal payment in 2021 while still having the same levy impact. By paying more principal, you're reducing your interest expense over the 20-year life of the bonds. So generally, interest rates were more favorable than what we'd estimated, so the total debt service cost is less. Included for informational purposes is a summary of the rating report that was compiled by Standard & Poor's. Typically, when the village goes into the bond market, you get a rating. The AA rating, which was the village's existing rating, was affirmed by S&P. Want to commend Matt and Deb, who did a very good job on the rating call, kind of giving a nice summary of the economic activity and financial condition of the village. The report's, largely positive in terms of their comments about the village specifically. There's a little more cautionary language in this report than there's been in the past. That's due to COVID-19 and just the general impact that that's having on municipalities nationwide. That's varied significantly, not only in Wisconsin, but from state to state. The village has managed that impact well, but S&P has a national rating methodology that they apply, so they're kind of putting some more cautionary statements in their reports to reflect the times that we're in. So all in all, a good bond sale result for the village. Interest rates more favorable than what we had estimated. In terms of the action that's before you this evening, is to adopt the resolution awarding the sale. Again, the par amount was reduced to $1,820,000. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the bond sale.
Any questions for Greg? Greg, you're only bringing us good news, so we don't have any questions, it appears.
Happy to deliver.
Appreciate that.
We need a motion, right, to approve?
Yeah, that's what we're getting to next. Thank you. So feel free.
All right, I will make the motion then to approve Resolution 2020-05 regarding the resolution awarding the sale of 1.85 million general obligation park and public grounds bonds, Series 2020A.
I'll second.
Do you want to? Okay. Do you want to motion or edit that to say 1.82 million?
Yeah, sorry, I was reading from the agenda. You betcha I do.
Yeah. Very good. And Paul, you're in agreement with that?
Yep, I'll second it. Yep.
Okay, great. We have a motion and second then to approve. Is there any further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor of approving the resolution, say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks again, Greg.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Then moving on to 6B is discuss and consider a request from Hamburg Equipment Incorporated for the reapproval of a CSM, which is a certified survey maps in Coyle Highlands South that has expired, and after being previously approved on April 15, 2019, the CSM proposed for reapproval is identical to which was previously approved and is being done for the purposes of reconfiguring the lot lines. There was a memo in the packet from Aaron. I don't know if you want to touch on this. There's actually a couple of them.
I think you kind of said it all. Nothing's really changing. The only issue is that the Hamburgs didn't get this recorded within the window of time that the approval was good for. So they're just basically looking for a reapproval to reopen that window so they can get it recorded.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the reapproval of the CSM and Quail Highlands South.
Second.
Is there, and then second by Sarah? Okay. Any further discussion? Having heard then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. And then moving on to item 7, new business. The first one, A, is discuss and consider the liquor license applications for the licensing year July 2020 through June 2021. There was an attached list within the packet. And I don't believe there are any issues with that list, if I recall correctly.
Yep, John, you're right. All of the background checks came back approved, and Chief Labor did all of the walkthroughs, other than the Mexican restaurant that is not completed in their build-out, which he will do that before it's issued.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Lisa, I just have a quick question. I noticed, like, for example, Papa Jimmy's has one for beer and one for wine, but others seem to have a combo. Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Sure.
Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I had unmuted. It's the type of license that they hold. So it's not a combination of beer and liquor, so that's why they're listed separately. And then they're issued as an individual license, Class C, because the wine has to be a C because they're a restaurant, and then the B is for the beer. So it's just the type of license that they hold is why it's listed twice on there.
So a place that has liquor/beer can also have wine.
Right, so they have the full menu, if you would say. I mean, I guess if you want to put it that way, they can serve anything.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
I'll make a
Otherwise,
motion
we have a
to approve
motion.
all listed.
I'll second.
All right.
I'll make a
Motion by
motion to
Troy.
approve all listed.
All right. Motion, I think, by Troy, and then seconded by Jeff. Troy did it so efficiently or inefficiently. He did it twice, but it probably due to the connection, I'm sure. Any
I
further
just like
discussion?
hearing myself.
There you go.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 7B then is discuss and consider the amusement device permit applications for the licensing year July 2020 through June 2021. Again, there's an attached list in our package. Any questions or comments there?
I guess I was wondering what is the license for, or the permit for specifically that they require that the amusement permit for like arcade games or?
Yep, so it's for arcade games, or are they called poker machines maybe, or whatever the machines are in the establishments. So
Okay,
that's what the license is for.
got it. Thanks.
Mhm.
I'll make a motion to approve the applications from July 2020 to June 2021.
All right. Is there a second? Motion second then. Any further discussion? Having heard none then, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 7C then is discuss and consider the cigarette license application for licensing year July 2020 through June 2021. And again, there's an attached list in our packets. Any questions or comments with that?
I'll make a motion to approve all on the list.
I'll second.
All right, is there seconded by Sarah? Any further discussion? Having heard, nope, no background. Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 7D then is discuss the annual village board prioritization process. This is something that Matt spearheads with us on an annual basis. It's used for staff goals and to help in our budgeting process, which will be upon us before we know it. So that's why we're getting started with this. Matt, I don't know if you want to chime in and kind of walk through your memo and everything.
Sure. What I included in the packet is basically a summary of how the process ended up in 2019, last time we went through it. So it kind of lists out the written descriptions that everyone submitted in the memo, and then the spreadsheet when each board member went to allocate their points, what the outcome was of that. So if we wanted to keep with that similar process this year, we'd look for about somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 projects, initiatives, or purchases that you'd like to submit with a short description of each of those. And if we could do that by June 11th, we could discuss those at the June 15th meeting, and then keep moving forward with a goal of having this completed potentially in July.
Any questions from that?
Paul, maybe being new, does this make sense, or?
Yeah, I'm good. It's clear.
So really nothing to, mostly just information tonight, just kind of kicking it off and kind of laying out the timeline. And also feel free to utilize any of the, you don't have to recreate the wheel if there's items that you'd want to resubmit from the past year process.
So Matt, we would expect then, as was done in the past, we'd combine the lists from board members and then go through the process of kind of prioritizing them, ranking them, and then come up with an overall, prioritization collectively from the board.
Correct. That's what the spreadsheet that was submitted. That's what that is. And then actually last year we took it a step further and we took the top 3 or 4 items and even made those as specific agenda items to talk about more specific objectives and goals for those, which we can do again.
All right, from the board, any questions, comments, concerns with kind of the flow of things?
Matt, you said June 11th, right? You'd like to see, preferably.
Yeah, that would be great if that's possible.
I just want to note that as I look through the list of priorities from last year, it seems like we made good progress on a lot of them over the years. So
Totally agree. Yeah.
So I think that this is a great way to determine how we're doing and what we've been doing. So it's good. Thanks for putting this together, Matt.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Nice comment, Melissa. I think everybody agree with that. All right, so we have our homework then for due by the 11th. Get those into Matt, and then we'll go from there and hopefully, again, get this, have a discussion at our next board meeting to continue moving this ahead. Because as I said at the outset, feeds into, goals for next year as well as really helping us kind of work through the budget and the priorities as the, board as an overall. So thanks, everyone.
I do have a quick question. Sorry to be tardy in my questioning, but what are your thoughts from others on the board around putting priorities on that already are happening, like, for example, the housing task force? Is it kind of the consensus that things that are already in motion and happening, we can assume will continue and don't need to put on this list, and this list should be more of a new thing, or should the list be new and existing? Does that make my question make sense?
It'd be new and existing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how you guys are going to do it?
So my comment on that would be to include existing as well, because this year there's only one new member to the board, but you never want to just assume that a priority from one year is a priority for the next year, because there's always a potential for different dynamics just with one new person, or even an entire board that remained the same to maybe change some of their viewpoints. So I think it makes sense to potentially reaffirm some of those things. It also allows individual board members to maybe redefine how those are, like the language that's used in each of those priorities as well. So those are just my thoughts. But there's no magic way to do this.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, then we move on to a little meatier topic, discuss and consider the emergency management plan. Matt Wagner included a memo, as well as we have a draft plan in our packet.
Hey, John.
So I don't know if,
this is Heidi. I hate to cut you off, but I was wondering, could we maybe rearrange just for a moment and go to the hydrite? We have someone here for the hydrite agenda item, and I don't know if this emergency management topic will take a long time, or I guess it depends on how long you think we'll discuss it. I don't want to, if we're going to be here for a long time, I mean, it's up to you.
No, we can do that. I didn't realize she was on. So, yes, if the board doesn't mind, we'll jump ahead then. And this is under reports from village board commissions and committees, and it is in regards to item 8A, where it's discuss and consider a request from Hydrite to install groundwater extraction and monitoring wells in Houston Park. This is an item that was covered by the Parks and Rec Committee a few weeks ago now. No, just over a few weeks now. We can have. And Heidi, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more before maybe we have the person from Hydrite chime in.
Sure. We also talked about it at Utility Commission, so JJ might have some more information too. And then Mark is on the phone, who will give us some more info. JJ, do you mind introducing this one?
Yep. I had a short memo in your packet, and then we also had the information from Mark with Tetra Tech on behalf of Hydrite. They, last year discovered a small, shallow, low concentration plume further northeast than previously known. And basically, in acting proactively, they contacted nearby homeowners and did vapor intrusion inspections. And finding none of that, now they want to move on and basically proactively do some pump testing and then testing of that water, and potentially set up a more semi-permanent pumping and treatment system there. we talked about it, utility use unanimously approved, and we brought it to parks because even though it's not a real significant impact to the park, it is in Houston Park, and so approved there as well. And now we're here. Mark's information should be in your packet as well, and he is on this call, so I'll let you direct any questions to him because he's the expert.
Yeah, I guess I just want to point out in that information packet there was a error in the description of the location of that well. There's a site map, and there's a well with an ID of EW165. That's the proposed extraction well, and it's actually up near the northwest corner of the Houston Park property, not the northeast as the write-up says. And yeah, JJ pretty much summarized what Hydrite wants to do out there. They discovered this shallow groundwater plume east and a little bit north of their facility. Back in summer of 2018, and based on that, the DNR requested that they do this vapor intrusion assessment of some homes north of the park. We did that in the winter of last year and shared that information with the village board in a letter report. And with the DNR agreeing that there was no vapor intrusion risk from this shallow groundwater plume to those homes, Hydrite still wanted to address that groundwater plume east of their facility with an extraction well or two to intercept flow so it doesn't impact or potentially impact any homes in the future. So the request right now is to install one extraction well approximately 40 feet deep with a 35-foot screen in the northwest corner of the Houston Park property. And after discussion with Parks and Recreation Committee and utilities, there was a couple of requests that they put together that Tetra Tech and Hydrite would implement. One was to put some protection bollards around the well because it's sort of near the dead end of, I think it's Trillium Trail on the north side of the Houston Park property. So that would protect it from potentially being hit by vehicles. And the request of the Parks and Rec was to craft an information letter to the neighbors of Houston Park to inform them of the activities that would be going on there is associated with having a drill rig out in the park to install the well and to develop the well for a period of like 2 or 3 days. And then at a later date, we'd be doing what's called a pumping test on that well to determine, what kind of yield we can expect from that well and to determine if we would need more than one extraction well to properly capture the groundwater plume found on Houston Park. And then, as JJ mentioned, eventually it's Hydrite's intent to install a treatment system on their property so the groundwater from this well and potentially 1 or 2 other ones would be piped back to the Hydrite Cottage Grove facility for treatment. And the preliminary design of that system would be to discharge the treated groundwater to a storm sewer that discharges to the ponds, the Houston Arrowwood Estates pond south of Houston Park. So the treated groundwater would be discharged there at some point in the future. And once if this first extraction well gets approved and the pump test gets approved, we'd come back to Parks and Rec and utilities and the village board with plans for either installing one or more additional wells to properly capture that, and with preliminary plans for the treatment of that groundwater.
Any questions for Mark? Mark, this is John. I'm just curious, how long is the expectation, or generally would this well be functioning? Is it pretty much for forever type thing, or is it, there might be, based on your experience with something like this, maybe a 5 or 10 year thing?
I would, yeah, the primary contaminants that are the concern in the groundwater, they're chlorinated solvents. There's things like trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene, which are pretty long-lasting in the environment. They do break down, but they're more persistent than petroleum-related contaminants. So I would, as some of you might be aware, Hydrate's been pumping from a deep source that was identified years ago, going on close to 17, 18 years now. And I don't foresee that being stopped anytime soon, because the concentrations down deeper are orders of magnitude higher than what we're seeing in the shallow. But I would say 10 plus years at least would be my expectation, but we'd have a better idea as to, once we have a couple of years of pumping and treating, to see what kind of trends we're seeing in the influent groundwater as it's being pumped. But typically, if it's petroleum, it would clean up a lot quicker. But unfortunately, it's not.
Okay. Well, thank you for that background. So, any other questions for Mark from the board?
I guess I'm just curious if they would eventually pump into the pond that's south of Houston Park. Would the citizens whose property, meet up with that pond? Would they be notified that there's chemicals being dumped into that pond?
The groundwater that would be discharged there would be treated, so the expectation would be that would have no or very low levels of the contaminants that are in the groundwater. So basically what would have to be done in order to have that approved is it'd have to go through a permitting process with Wisconsin DNR, and they have requirements, water quality requirements for discharging to surface water bodies. So anything below those levels would not be considered by the state or the regulators as being a concern. But the intent would be to treat the groundwater that's discharged to that pond to no detections or below the surface water quality standard set by the DNR. So that shouldn't be a concern. In addition, that little pond is sampled as part of the monitoring program for the deeper groundwater plume that we're monitoring for hydrate. So we do have data for that pond now, and so we continue to monitor that to demonstrate that the treated water that's being discharged to that isn't negatively impacting the pond. And again, I think, is the Parks Department's, idea that this letter would probably go out to all the, the residents in the area to let them know what's going on. So, and there's actually some monitoring wells in some of the residential properties along the pond, in the basically be the public common areas of that subdivision. So I'm sure most of the residents in that area are aware the monitoring activity going on there already.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Mark?
Yeah, I was wondering about how much water, I mean, maybe you don't know this now, but we're talking about the amount of water that could potentially affect any flooding in any of the surroundings? Or how much water are we talking about?
I did do a preliminary modeling of what we do have a three-dimensional flow model of the area that was developed a number of years ago. So I use that to give an estimate as to what kind of pumping rates we probably expect, and to be probably on the order of 10 to 15 gallons a minute for one or two wells. So potentially 20 to 30 gallons a minute, which is, that's most domestic wells. You're talking only you're only maybe producing 400 to 500 gallons a day from a domestic well. So it's a substantial amount of water, but it's not, a high capacity well, which is, the 70 to 80 gallon a minute range. And the size of the pond would be able to handle that. And there's actually an overflow structure on the south end of the pond that drains to a drainage ditch and eventually to Koshkonong Creek to the east. So as far as flooding, that wouldn't be a problem because there is a discharge structure there already. And you're talking, because we did flow measurements out of that discharge structure for the pond a few times, and it was on the order of 1,100 cubic feet a second or something like that. So that's like probably over 800 gallons a minute or something like that. So it can handle quite a bit of flow. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from board members? Otherwise, either.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Heidi.
I'll make a motion to approve the groundwater extraction monitoring wells at Houston Park for hydrite with the recommendations from the committees to make sure the well is blocked off and some kind of communication to the neighbors in the area about what's going on.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motion and second, then. Is there any further discussion? Having heard none, then, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, thanks, Mark, for joining us, and thanks, Heidi, for letting me know that he was there.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll sign off then.
You're welcome to continue listening on. But all right, so now we'll move back up then to the emergency plan. And again, as I was saying earlier, Lieutenant Mark Wagner has a memo in the packet. And he can walk us through that. And then we also have the actual draft plan in our packets too.
Matt, you want me to start, or you want to take over first?
You can start, man. It was hard hearing you there. I don't know if you're talking to me.
Let me, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy, I think, at least for me.
All right. I don't know how emergency government got pushed behind wells as what's more important and more exciting, but I thought emergency government would have been to the top. But I guess Heidi has other ways of entertaining herself. So, as you can see, as the memo, I put together a draft, about a 60-some page document in your packets for the emergency government plan that's covered by state statute. If you're having trouble falling asleep at night, go ahead and take a read, and we'll go through it. I know Matt said we'll put this on the agenda again for the next meeting for approval, but this will give you 2 weeks of leisure reading time to go through the manual. I don't take credit, as Heidi said. I believe in the last meeting I did a lot of cutting and pasting from other municipalities. So I didn't sit down and type this document, but I did try to pull as much information that's relevant to the village into it. Again, this is just draft form, and I know Matt's going to talk to the board about having our legal counsel go through it just to make sure that we're covering all of our bases.
Yes, there's, as you scroll through the document, there's a handful of sections that are highlighted red. After going through it, we felt that these were sections that we would want some legal review on. We don't think necessarily the entire document needs legal review, so we just tried to do our best to highlight those areas to save some time during the review. So if there's any questions for Matt or I or staff, we could take those if you've had a chance to go through the document at all yet. But that's also why we were looking to have it on the agenda at least one additional time to give everyone plenty of time to read through it and make any suggested changes or ask questions. But then at the end of the item, the one item I would like to ask for approval on is a motion to spend a little bit of legal time to review those sections that are highlighted.
Thanks, Matt. And Matt, any initial comments on the plan as it's drafted right now, or Matt and I already talked about the kind of paring down the sections that Larry and company will have to take a look at, and that seems very reasonable to me and prudent. Then the other thing is we'll have, I think, next time we'll also need to talk about not only this plan, but what type of joint interaction we'd want to have with the town, because we do technically still have a committee on the books related to joint emergency government, and we have actually funds associated with that in an account jointly with the town. So we'd have those 2 items kind of spelled out as agenda during our next meeting to have a discussion around that. So just have to think on those as well.
One additional item to discuss is our ordinance is something that also should be reviewed in conjunction with this. So that would be the only other addition I would suggest our attorneys take a look at the ordinance and make any recommended changes with that, which we could maybe do in conjunction with approval of this plan. And Matt started review on that for, as you can see, there's a couple sections that it's referenced in the document here.
Anything from the board? Any initial questions or comments? I just want to make a quick comment before I turn it over. Lieutenant Wagner, I certainly appreciate whether you say cutting, pasting, or whatever you want to call it, just the thought in putting this more extensive document. I'm sure that board members will get a good work through, and then certainly we'll have legal, Larry and company, take a look at those red sections. I know staff has also done a first pass on this as well, and thank you for that too. So I'll turn it over to, I don't know if it was Sarah who piped in or Melissa. I didn't.
Yeah, it was me, Sarah. I just have so I would echo John's thanks. This was, I know, a lot of work. So thank you. And I just noticed that the list where you have all of the action steps and lead agencies depending on the hazards of concern, well, you found probably like 50 of them. We don't have pandemic on that list.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we had kind of talked about too with the staff is like, I mean, is there a catch-all for the ones that we're not used to? Because I don't think we're going to be able to list every emergency that possibly could happen. So we're just hoping that it would fall under one of the categories that we've already listed, or we can kind of make it fall into one of those categories. But I can definitely add pandemic. I have absolutely no problem with that. That's an easy fix.
It doesn't matter to me. I just found it a little comical in my dry sense of humor that it wasn't in the draft, but yet it's our current emergency.
Yeah, and you weren't the only one that noticed it. Some of the other staff mentioned it also. So.
Well, it is listed in the list of possible hazards, so.
Oh.
So, number 12. So it made the cut. So do we need to make a motion tonight for the attorney review? Is that what you were saying, Matt?
Yes, please. Yep.
Okay. I'll make a motion to have our attorneys review the emergency management plan and village ordinance regarding emergency government.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion second to have the attorneys take a look at the ordinance as well as the red sections in the plan. I'm sure they'll read through the other parts to connect the dots, but is there any further discussion then? Having heard none then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Now we move back to Parks and Recs, or actually the Village Board commissions and committees, and starting with Parks and Recs and Forestry Committee. I can kind of walk through the other items, and then I'm sure Sean will have to jump in regarding the programming and damage set to bleachers.
Sure, thanks, John. I was expecting a little bit longer of an emergency management plan conversation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked for it to be shuffled around. I just wanted to make sure that our emergency management got the time that it deserved to discuss if needed. So, yes, thank you for preparing that, and we'll look forward to the next draft. So we met, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry met on May 21st, and we did talk about the hydrite. We also talked about the Glacial Drumlin Bike Path going through Bakken Park and just the formality of allowing that through the park. We talked about the bleachers to Chris Nelson, and then COVID response for our programming. So I could turn it over to Sean to kind of explain the damaged bleachers. There's some information in your packet about that. I don't know, Sean, if you want to jump in.
Sure. I think we'll, according to the agenda, we'll go with the discuss the summer recreation programming quickly through. I provided you a rather lengthy memo in your packet. I'll just kind of try and skim through some of the highlights of that memo. I'm sure we're all aware of where we are with the Safer at Home, and we've moved into phase one. This does allow for some limited programming, outdoor activities such as baseball and softball. They could practice, but not competition. We could move into phase two, but we're not really sure what's going to happen moving forward in the next week. It was a difficult thought process, but after kind of weighing the options, I kind of felt like it might be in the best interest of the village to just hold off on any in-person programming until August 1st, with the recommendation that we would revisit that for sure in July, but also at our June meeting to just see where we were at with things. As I mentioned in the memo, the biggest thing is PPE and the safety of our participants. Would require a lot of PPE, sanitizing of things, and securing the PPE for the village of Cottage Grove at the amount of product that we would need is difficult and costly, which is something that obviously no one has budgeted for. We anticipate, should we move forward, we're going to have to adhere with social distancing requirements, and so that could cause our class sizes to become smaller, and then it becomes, it kind of moves into the quality of the program that we're offering. If we have to go to a smaller class size and it is a program that we hire an instructor for, we're either going to have to ask them to take less money, or possibility of raising program costs, and that, again, as I mentioned, goes right into the quality of the program. And that scares me a little bit too. I don't want to offer something just to offer it and have it be a horrible experience or a not so pleasant experience for our customers. The phases could be fluid. We're currently in phase one. We could move into two as early as a week from today, but we could also enter two and possibly move back into phase one, and then we're kind of back at square one where we're offering a program, but now we have to cancel that program. One of the biggest things that really helped me decide this was MSCR, the largest entity in our area, has canceled all of their summer programming, and they're looking to hold off on doing things until August. And Fitchburg also canceled all their summer programming, and their splash pad and pool are closed for the season. So those are when it comes to the summer programming, those are the big things. Some other topics that I wanted to discuss was our shelters, and without our summer programs running and our playgrounds currently being closed until phase two, I'm sorry, I typed phase three in the memo, that is phase two, I apologize. And just the cleaning and things that would be involved in keeping those usable. It doesn't seem logical to me to open those shelters prior to at least July 1. And that kind of goes into our shelter reservation process, where we are looking to cancel those for the month of June, and most of our folks that have reserved are aware of that and completely understand, and then we would move into opening the shelters back up for reservation only, unless we were in phase two as of July 1. Again, if playgrounds are closed and we don't offer any programming, it doesn't seem real logical to me for those shelters to be open on a daily basis. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what I was thinking. As we move forward, I also put in the memo that there are some things that I think we need to consider. One would be Home Talent Baseball. Home Talent is not a program that the village offers. It's all done through Home Talent Baseball, and even though they occupy a village park, I feel my recommendation would be to let them run that program as they see fit, or let them run their league as they see fit. They're looking to start on or about July 4th. I've had conversations with them and said that we will not be cleaning the restrooms at Fireman's, and nor would we be taking care of anything in the concession area. And that could certainly be a choice that the board made, that we're not going to allow any programming at Fireman's Park. Second bullet point on there was, would we allow, if we didn't allow any in-person programming, would we allow the Monona Grove School District to hold? I've been contacted by Kevin Connor, who's the varsity baseball coach, and he would like to do some, kind of in-person training, field workouts and things like that. And would we allow that to happen? I've reached out to Jeff Schreiner to find out what the district protocols are, and he has not returned a couple of my calls. So I'm not sure as to where they are. I do know that they are not allowing, obviously everybody knows they're not allowing anything district-wide until after June 30th. And then the third point was the Music in the Grove. The May and the June events have been canceled. It's been brought up that we could possibly run these events and require people to stay in their vehicles if they wanted to participate. If we did something like that, we would have to move it probably to Fireman's Park to be able to allow vehicles to park on the grass. But my personal feeling is that who's going to police that if somebody does get out? And to me, the most logical thing is to wait until we would reach phase 3 before we would allow that, and we could open those things completely back up. So there were some motions on there, which I'm sure that you guys have taken a look at. Our Parks and Rec Committee voted to cancel programming, in-person programming until August 1st. And then also our shelter reservations through July 1, and keep the shelters locked without a reservation until August 1st. That being said, and please do jump in. I know Paul, Paul with the YMCA, they are doing some different things as well. But I believe that you guys all received an email from Jen Klosky today, which Jen runs a cheer and tumbling program, which the village basically facilitates. We take registrations and pay staff and things like that. So technically it is one of our programs, but they pretty much run it themselves. And so she provided you with a pretty good plan of what they intend on doing, and gave you examples of other gyms that are open, which, mind you, those are all privately run and for-profit gyms. So with that, I've talked long enough. I would love to hear some questions and comments.
Any questions or comments for Sean?
So is Kevin Connor asking you to potentially do in-person practice before August 1st?
Yes. Being as that we moved into phase 1, they can potentially hold practices in small groups spread out on the field. And that was clearly, should there not be Legion Baseball, which is a program that we run. Legion Baseball, as you've probably heard, pretty much across the nation has pulled out and it has said that they are not going to run. The program that the league that we are a part of is basically a Dane County league, and they are trying to stay organized and being able to run, but the social restriction guidelines on that are making it extremely difficult. So Kevin is just looking to, I think, get his kids playing baseball again in some way, shape, or form. Batting cages are now allowed to be open, so they can occupy those. We have currently, as of today, we have not opened up the baseball field at Fireman's yet. There's some logistic stuff there, but we are ready to do that as soon as tomorrow, should we need to.
So it's not like Kevin or Jen Kolaski could potentially run this on their own. They would need you to get your approval then, Sean, to be able to utilize space and the facility?
I'll take those individually. Kevin and MG Baseball, that would be just us allowing them to use Fireman's Park. So that could certainly be a social distancing thing. Jen Klosky, that falls into one of our programs. And so to answer your question about her, no, she could not. They are currently running virtual programming and doing some virtual training, which they would obviously continue in moving forward if we chose to not allow in-person programming. But Kevin would be just looking for permission to use the space. And then again, it would not be something that the village would be responsible for should someone get sick or them not adhering to social distancing policies.
Yeah, I would think you sport coaches that are doing practices that aren't, technically endorsed by the village. I mean, what's to stop them? But my only concern would be, are you potentially running a risk of allowing a few that are, the village programs, and setting a precedent that we're saying we're doing a few, but not the others. That would be my only thought. You asked me earlier at the Y. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we're running 2 different summer sessions, June 1st through July 19th. We made a fundamental decision to cancel all those programs. Our second session runs July 19th through September 5th, and we're in a position just to wait. We're communicating that to our members and participants that we're still, staying open-ended to that and waiting for more information as we see the phases unfold.
One caveat for us is also we're not going to allow field reservations for our ball fields, which we typically do until our summer programs, our baseball and softball get going. So we kind of decided that we would not allow outside entities to come in and reserve our facilities. That certainly doesn't stop anyone from showing up and being on that field, because the only field that we have that is completely closed off and locked would be Fireman's. But we just felt like we weren't going to encourage people to make reservations and then have any sort of a risk fall on the village because they said it's okay. Well, we're not saying it's okay.
And Sean, am I understanding the ask from Jen correctly in that she's asking for in-person for one particular selection of girls for the teams, but not for all of the classes?
That's correct.
Okay, and when they are virtual, are we charging the same amount of money as if it was in person?
We are not charging the same amount of money as if it was in person.
We're not. It's less, I'm hoping.
Correct. And they're also not doing any virtual programming from our fitness area. That has been completely since March 13th. That has been closed off. So they have to do that remotely.
Okay.
Any other questions for Sean?
Again, if I can just reiterate, I know this is a difficult and a really crappy decision to have to make at this time, but it is something that we feel that if we can at least tell our registration or our participants that at this point we are not going to allow in-person program, but that we will evaluate, and anything that we could possibly run, as Paul mentioned, mid-July. If we can organize some leagues and do some things like that, we certainly will attempt to do that. It's if you looked at the one of the pages of the packet, it was a spring summer, and if I can just share my screen here real quick, I have that up. So if you can see that, these are the programs and how they're affected and when we think that we can run them. This has been updated, and a lot of the baseball stuff, everybody seems to be canceling. and so I don't anticipate that being too much of much chance of getting that going. Some things like our archery, we'd love to get back into our adult fitness, anything with the exception of senior fitness, which we couldn't do until phase 3. But it really comes down to us being able to provide a safe environment. Excuse me, and knowing that our instructors and our participants are doing the right things and maintaining the social distancing, and for us to Cottage Grove to continue to kind of lessen that curve.
I guess I'd like to make a motion for the staff recommendations of canceling all in-person programming until August 1st, canceling all park shelter reservations through July 1st, and keeping all park shelters locked unless a reservation until August 1st, and suspend all field reservations until August 1st. What else do we have here?
I think that pretty much covers it, Troy. Matt, are you okay with that? Matt, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, that sounds good. Another way to, Troy, you could maybe just mention the date of, we could reference in the motion like we sometimes do with Aaron Ruth's memos, where you could reference the date of the memo in the motion as well, reflecting that.
Sure. So I would include the memo, Parks and Recreation Forestry Staff Report memo dated May 27th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and second then. Is there any further discussion?
If I may, thank you, Troy, for making the motion and Melissa for seconding that. I would like to also just address the home talent and the Monona Grove baseball and also the music in the Grove, if we could. I was really looking for guidance on those. As I mentioned, the Home Talent League, I'm comfortable with them running their own thing and doing their own thing there since it's not village programmed. And I'm looking for guidance on the high school baseball as well as the music in the Grove.
As far as the Home Talent League with the restroom, do we have to open those restrooms up and close them then?
Those are locked. Melissa, if you can picture it, that's in the concession area. So those are locked always except for when there's an event there. So they would be in charge of opening and closing those on a daily basis as well as cleaning. And I talked with them and they were good with that.
Does that put any liability on us at all from a legal perspective, or?
Larry, do you want to jump in on that one?
Maybe I could share it. We went through that actually through some of our, when we shifted gears at the Y, we went primarily to emergency child care and also food programs. We did a lot of things at virtual, but some of our instructors wanted to do more things on their own, and we did cover that with our legal, and we said as long as it's not being endorsed by the YMCA, we could move forward and do, those instructors could do those programs virtually. I would think that it'd be similar with the home talent and also Kevin Connor, the varsity baseball coach, as long as it's not an endorsement of the village, from what I understand, it wouldn't be an issue. But, again, maybe Larry wants to jump in and he has more thoughts to that.
Yeah, I can jump in and sorry about the lack of video after I just bragged last week that I had it all, or 2 weeks ago that I had it all figured out. So a couple of things. One, we always have to keep in mind that the liability of the village is very unique from the standpoint of having municipal liability protection. And that's where we really differ from an organization like the Y, where we want to be careful, we want to protect people, want to keep people safe, but there are pretty significant caps on our liability. So that's one thing to always keep in mind, and that's one of the great advantages of being on a board for a local unit of government as opposed to even a not-for-profit entity. But I think from what I'm hearing, and we've worked somewhat already with, to some degree already with Sean on some of these things, you can only you got to make your decisions based on a broad variety of factors, and the legal side is just one of those. And I guess I don't think that the legal interest here should really direct your choice, because you have a lot of liability protection, and if you decide to move forward with whatever option you do, will help to put you in the best position you can be in under that decision legally. So I don't know that necessarily dictates which direction to go for policy choice here.
Thanks. Our staff isn't going to, they would just be responsible for everything that they did there, just like a first come, first serve at the park, just not a reservation. Is that how we're picturing it, right, Sean?
Yeah, they typically, we don't do any maintenance, pregame maintenance for them as it is, so they do use a little bit of our equipment, and so it wouldn't be an additional tax on us for home talent to continue to play games.
What if there's a outbreak of COVID-19 in the facilities on the equipment? They would be responsible for cost and taking care of cleaning all of that stuff, presumably?
It's like, Troy, as I understand it, it's like anything else right now that we're, when it comes to bleachers and dugouts and things like that, we are saying that these are as clean as they can be, but with no guarantee that somebody would not possibly get sick by being a part of in a dugout or sitting on a bleacher. That's what
I guess I'm thinking more of the restrooms that are locked, and the only reason they're unlocked is for their activities. Our equipment, the only reason the equipment is being used is because of them, by them. I'm not sure I want to put us in a position that we have added cost to clean this stuff for it. You know what I'm saying?
The restrooms themselves, they will clean on their own. As far as any equipment that they use of ours, it's something that we would be cleaning daily no matter what. So just really the biggest question in my mind would be the restroom facilities, and that they have agreed to take that upon themselves.
When would the MG baseball start?
He hasn't given me a for sure date of when he was looking at. I think that there's going to be a lot of kids that are playing club baseball, and some organizations are trying to move forward with this stuff. So we could put on a date of whatever we wanted. We could put on a restriction of phase 2. We could say as of tomorrow. He hasn't given me a firm date as to when he wants to get going. My guess is because they lost their spring season, and that there won't be any Legion baseball, that he'll want to get going with that as quickly as possible.
And Sean, isn't that based on really what the school protocols and the athletic department has to say about that as well? It's not just us.
Yeah, that's what I would like it to be, because if it's not our program and we're simply allowing them to use the field, I had asked Kevin via a conversation we had last week if there was any sort of anything that came down from the school district, and he just said that no, they're not really saying anything at this point. So, again, I would hold him off and hold off that until I got direction from the district, because I certainly don't want to encourage something that the district is against at this point. But again, I have not heard back from Jeff Schreiner.
Okay, so that's really been kind of on the table then until they get back to you,
to me,
particularly the district.
Yeah, to me, I mean, since it's not one of our programs and Kevin Connor would be operating under the umbrella of Monona Grove School District, I think that the district should have a say in how that is done.
With the Home Talent League, they don't start until July 4th. So we could maybe put that off for now.
We could. And they are, I'm sorry, Melissa, they are having a meeting, they being the Home Talent League, are having a meeting tomorrow night to decide the fate of their season. As you can possibly imagine, a lot of their full-size baseball facilities are on school grounds, and so it's going to really depend on who can play and who can play where. So I will have more information in regards to that after their meeting tomorrow night.
I guess I'm leaning towards, if we aren't allowing the cheer and tumbling when they have a plan laid out, I'm not necessarily comfortable with having kids play baseball or adults play baseball, just because that has more opportunity to have close encounters, I think. So then, as far as Music in the Grove, I think I agree that to wait till phase 3. My 2 cents on that.
One thing about the Music in the Grove is we depend on sponsorship to pay for the music. So it's a challenging time to ask our local businesses to sponsor an event. I mean, not that we'd have to make a decision on it now, we can always wait, but I think it might be challenging to ask businesses to pay for music. Even though it might cheer up some people, it's a hard time to do that.
I would agree with Melissa too about the baseball team, high school. As I was mentioning, that he's going to do this on his own accord, but it's still, an endorsement of the high school program. So I think that's an important note, Sean, and you said it yourself. That for sure would require some conversation and discussion with the high school administration, and certainly wouldn't want to bring it back forward until they would even approve it. So I think that was an important point.
So if you guys are okay with it, we can hold off on the high school part of things until I can get some better direction from the district and what they will allow and what they won't. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I would say yep.
All right.
Any towards hometown at this point? Do you want to wait and talk about it at our next meeting when I have more information as to what their plans are? It may be a moot point at this time, but I could, if it makes anybody feel more at ease, I could ask them for a possible plan on how they would address the bathroom situation. I've given them a couple of options. One, they could either, as we mentioned, take care of them themselves, or they could rent porta potties, which then it would be less on them to do any of the cleaning. So if you'd like, we can wait on that one as well until 2 weeks from tonight, and move forward.
Yeah, I think it's best to see what they're going to do. I wouldn't want to necessarily approve them to play and them thinking that, well, they let us, so we might as well go ahead. I mean, I think it's up to them to decide what they want to do, and then we decide what we're going to do.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and second, I think that still applies here with that discussion. With all three of these items kind of in limbo yet until really we get into further phases and more clarity from those organizations. So with that then, all those, unless there's any other discussion, I'll ask for all those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. And then item C then is discuss and consider donating a damaged set of bleachers to Chris Nelson.
Yep, I promise I'll be brief on this one. We, as I mentioned in a memo, we do have a section of bleachers that was damaged due to probably a few things, but mostly back in the day when we used to move bleachers around for Fireman's Fest. When it came time for us to retrofit and move these bring these bleachers into compliance, that particular section was going to be somewhere around a $15,000 overhaul. Then we decided that we just didn't really need them. We had enough bleacher seating at all of our parks, and so it's just simply been sitting kind of along the tree line at Fireman's Park. Chris Nelson, who I'm sure everybody knows but lives right on the corner of Grove and Clark, just asked if it would be something that the village would be willing to donate, as he's a part of a mini bike group, and I think they compete in Lake Mills. I'm not positive where they're at, but if the village would be comfortable in donating that section of bleachers to them as is. And I said I would bring it up, but we would certainly need to come up with some sort of a hold harmless agreement that they get what they get and that the village is not responsible for anything moving forward.
I was going to tie into the question I had. I missed it. Are the bleachers in decent shape?
They have a couple of structural issues. The biggest part about it, some footboard and some bracing things. Nothing that's going to cause them to fall over per se. The biggest part would be for us to retrofit them and bring them into compliance with anything higher than 3 seats requires caging. So we didn't do it when we caged the rest of them because we didn't need it. And as of right now, we don't have a spot that we would want to put these, nor would I want to spend $15,000 to replace things. So long story short, Paul, they are not going to fall over.
Well, then, as you mentioned, then we would really want to make sure that we're clear of any liabilities, and I don't know if that's some form of an agreement. Sounds like you mentioned that will have to be in place.
Yeah, I would ask that with the board's permission and Matt's permission that if legal, could please just write up some sort of a document that releases the village of liability for those bleachers. They're going to haul them, they're going to move them, they're going to do everything with them. We're not touching them.
Larry, any comment there?
I guess I can answer for Larry.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess the agreement that we could draw up would just be pretty simple and quick. I think it'd be good to have a hold harmless sort of agreement, but it would just be a pretty quick thing to draft, so it wouldn't take too much time.
Rick, would there be a cost to that? Right, because if we're donating these and we're putting cost in to donate, that somebody would have to cover that.
Yeah, I mean, we would have our regular billing rate, I suppose. It would just be a minimal amount of time. I don't foresee it taking a very long time to do.
Jeff, would it be okay if I put that stipulation that, it's $200. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is. The billing rate is for legal, but that they paid for that cost of that agreement.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
Yeah, that should be minimal.
Can you give Sean a dollar figure of like what is minimal? So when he talks with this person,
Yeah, it wouldn't take. We Rick and I will. I can't imagine it would take us an hour, but we'll cap our time at an hour, so $200.
Perfect.
And how much do those bleachers?
Because we don't.
It takes you 5 hours. Oof.
I'll eat the rest of it.
That's a good deal. How much do the bleachers normally cost? Like if they weren't damaged, not to repair them, just to buy a set of bleachers like this?
If we were to buy a set of bleachers exactly like what we have down there, so 21-foot caging and the whole 9 yards, completely ADA accessible, we'd probably be somewhere in the vicinity of $25,000.
And how much would it cost for us to dispose of these damaged bleachers?
The only thing we could possibly get out of it would be any sort of aluminum recycling fee. It would be just staff time and taking them apart and then hauling them to Reynolds or wherever. I don't know what the cost of aluminum is right now, but I don't anticipate that we would gain a whole lot of money if we just tried to recycle them.
And how long have they been sitting there unused?
I've been here about 4 years.
Okay.
All right. Is there a consideration for motion then, either way?
I'll move to donate the damaged set of bleachers to Chris Nelson with the legal agreement that we're not liable after the sale as is, and that Chris Nelson pays for up to 1 hour of legal time for drafting the agreement.
I'll second.
All right. There's a motion and second then. Any further discussion? All right. Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for
and Heidi. Then moving on to Deer Grove EMS Commission. Troy?
Yeah, we met Thursday, May 1st. Calls are slightly down, or slightly up, I should say, for the month compared to last year, 81 versus 78. Year to date, we're almost on par, 333 this year versus 341 last year. We received some funds from the CARES Act Provider Relief Fund, and let me look here. I forgot what we did with that. Help me out, Sarah.
I don't know that I remember either, Troy.
All right, sorry, bad note taking. That's on me. There was an item to discuss a 2021 ambulance replacement process. That was tabled until the budgeting process, and the thought behind that is Unit M81 is a backup unit, has 150,000 miles on it. What they'd like to do is take one of the newer units, turn that into a backup unit, and then have the newer one as obviously more modern one that we don't have issues with. But again, that was tabled, so I know there's a bit of controversy the last time we had a double ambulance purchase, and I did bring that up at the meeting. There may be some resistance by the village. I'm speaking personally, so we'll see where that takes us in the fall. We did elections for chair and secretary, along with check signers, and the next meeting will be a virtual meeting, and that be, my calendar here, on June 18th. Any questions at all?
Yeah. How much does a new ambulance cost?
I believe on the upwards about 400,000. Right now we have 199,000. They have 199,000 in funds available. So the balance would be split amongst the village of Cottage Grove, the town of Cottage Grove, and the village of Deerfield. In percentages, I want to say the village is a little over 50%. If I remember right, the town is it about 30%, and the village of Deerfield is around 20%. And again, keep in mind that 2 or 3 years down the road, they'd be looking at rotating another one out and replacing it as well. So I think it's good to replace it not in the same year like we did in the past because it was such a large capital investment. But yeah, so that to answer your question, it's right around $400,000.
Okay, thanks.
Long answer, sorry.
No, that's great. And then who's the new chair and secretary?
Oh, chair is it was the town of village of Deerfield's turn, so Greg Frutiger, and secretary is town of Cottage Grove, Chris Hampton.
Thank you.
No problem. Anything else?
I think John's talking, but John, you're not coming through.
That's when you have two devices going. Sorry, folks. So I said, I thanked both Troy and Sarah, and then asked if there's any more questions. Didn't hear any because you guys didn't hear me. And then was going to move on to Joint Fire Department Committee.
Melissa, you're on mute now.
There, thanks. I did it too. Thank you. So, the rapid response vehicle, the chassis is still waiting to be built. Everything else is complete and ready to go when the chassis is completed, but the coronavirus closures caused more delay. We did not get the firehouse subs grant previously that we had wanted to get 8 sets of equipment for, but they have reapplied for it, this time asking for 6 sets of equipment, so between $18,000 and $9,000. We discussed the 2% fire dues that the state of Wisconsin gives every municipality, and it needs to be spent on certain specified things like fire protection equipment, fire inspection services, fire protection service, fire prevention education, fire inspection education, or firefighter retirement funds. We discussed the PFAS foam disposal and replacement, and we had 3 estimates for removal and disposable of the foam from the fire trucks. One estimate was about $7,700. But it noted that the firefighters would have to help with removal from the trucks. So we're getting more information about that one. And then the other one from SET Environmental or SET Environmental, they would dispose of it all and rinse out the trucks for $16,000. So we're getting a little bit more information before we decide what to do with that. Maybe we'll learn if there's any help from the states with the disposal at that time. An AFG grant was completed before our previous meeting in January, which is a federal grant, and it was a bond effort with Marshall Fire and EMS, Deerfield Fire, Grove EMS, Cottage Grove Fire, and Cambridge Fire to get all new radios, because ours is really old apparently. So it was like $800,000 to $900,000 request for the grant. So we'll hope to hear sometime in August to December, depending on how busy federal government is with other things. The chief's report, we have 37 members, 8 officers, 2 were operators, 10 probationary, and 17 firefighters. We've had 93 calls for the year. They've been doing some virtual trainings with staff and now team meetings in smaller groups. The fire and EMS station has been empty, except if there's an emergency. They're going by county guidelines. The Firemen's Festival, as you know, is canceled. Most of the companies or people that donated money for the festival have indicated that the fire department should keep that. They're also looking at different types of fundraising, maybe a community picnic in the fall, depending on how things go. And all the money that they did get from Firemen's Festival in the past went back into the community. They used it for continuing education, for firefighters, an extrication tool. They helped to pay for the UTV, and they fund the home talent team. They applied for a SAFER grant in April, which is to help recruit and retain firefighters. That provides about $40,000 over 4 years to send flyers to all households in the district every year about becoming a firefighter, and to replace the sign in front of the building to an LED sign so that they could provide information about the community and upcoming activities and get new recruits. They applied for a Wisconsin Public Service grant for emergency responders, which is for about $2,000 to replace all their flashlights on the SCBAs, which are about 18 years old. Some of the flashlights are dead or go dead on calls. They use their own flashlights. They applied for the DNR grant again, which is a 50-50 grant, which they had used for the UTV last year. And they're looking at options to offset the cost of getting the new firefighting foam once the PFAS foam is out of the fire trucks. We had elections of officers. I am the new chair, and Mike Duclay from the town is the secretary. And the next meeting will be probably in a couple of months. Did I miss anything, Paul or Sarah?
You covered it well.
Yep. Great. Any questions?
All right. Thanks, Melissa. We will move on then to reports from village officers, starting with Stafford.
Nothing to report today.
Same here. Thank you. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Then moving on to the COVID-19 updates, we'll start with Matt. Matt Keezy.
Yes, thanks, John. So we've started the gradual reopen here in phase 1 for back open for in-person business with the safety precautions that were part of a memo sent to the board and also shared on social media and our website. That's for Village Hall and the Municipal Services Building. That's all gone well. One little bit of a hang up with Village Hall is that we have a back order for plexiglass that isn't in yet, so the front service counter is not open, but we are utilizing the vestibule just as we did during the election, and we've not had many people come in, so that's worked well because as of now that the vestibule can only accommodate one person at a time, but given not a lot of traffic coming in. That has not been a problem. So hopefully we get the plexiglass in soon to get that counter up and running in Village Hall. But otherwise, the in-person reopen is going well. The last week, the state announced the Routes to Recovery grant that was shared with you all, which was a reimbursable grant that is available to all municipalities in Wisconsin, which is based on population, and the village's amount is about $109,000. And again, that's a reimbursable amount with only certain expenses that can be applied for reimbursement. And Lieutenant Wagner sat in on a conference call and has been staying up to date on that. But a brief summary on the types of things that we know are eligible, and we're still kind of waiting to learn more. But personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, and costs of additional sick leave and FMLA. We know those are for sure, but there's still more to learn. So Matt can cover that maybe during his update. And then lastly, at the beginning of the meeting, you may have heard Trustee Lundberg bring up potentially starting to meet again in person for board meetings. My suggestion would be maybe we could have an agenda item at the next meeting to discuss that and have that, if the decision is to continue to meet virtually, that we just have that as a agenda item on each agenda, just so the board can discuss that and decide if what everyone wants to do. So, any questions for me before I pass the baton?
Nope. Thanks, Matt. So we'll move on to Chief Labor.
Which topic do you want me to get into first?
Well, everyone comes top to mind around COVID-19.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the lobby's open. We're getting a couple people a day coming in, so the word got out that we're open again, and we have plenty of equipment and supplies, so we're in good shape there. We're back to operating fairly normal when it comes to doing traffic stops, those types of things. We still, on medical calls, will wait outside unless it's EMS needs us inside. So we're getting pretty close back to business as normal as far as COVID goes.
Any questions for Chief?
Was there something else, Chief, that is on your mind that maybe is for later in the agenda? I didn't see it.
Oh, Melissa asked me to do an update on use of force and the situation that's, the Floyd case and how that's impacting us and all that. So I don't know if you want me to get into that later or now.
I'll let John decide what it was about.
Yeah, I mean, that's not part of the agenda, I guess. We probably do that on a future agenda if that's...
Right. Yeah, and Chief, I appreciate that you directed me to the website regarding the your use of force guidelines too. I appreciated that. It's nice to know that's out there and available.
Yep, and we have an annual report for the past 5 years on there, and it has our use of force incidents, and I review them to make sure our policies and procedures are up to date, and if there's any disturbing trends, I look at those, but so far so good on our yearly reports and where we're at.
All right. Then we'll move on to Lieutenant Wagner.
Yeah, the only thing really to add to Matt's comments is, as he says, I do sit in on quite a few meetings during the week just to try to keep up to date with this whole fluid situation and how everything's changing. The CARES Act funding is going to be, we have until November 1st to submit it, which is good, so we can be able to sit down as a staff and really crunch our numbers and make sure that we're not overlapping or that we don't have multiple submissions to me. And I believe Troy had mentioned too, to make sure that we're getting EMS and fire involved too, since the village does pay their percentage towards that. So I'll be reaching out to them. Again, we'll come together, we'll get the list all put together, and then we'll submit that to the state. And then the way that it's sounding now is that we put the list together, we send it to the state, we get refunded what they believe we should get refunded, and then what we don't get refunded, then we can also send that list into FEMA and look for federal reimbursement. But first we'll do state, and then we'll do federal once we get to that point. As it comes, everyone mentioned that we have started opening up. We're still making sure that everyone is, keeping clean. We're still sanitizing the squads, sanitizing the public works vehicles when we can. So we're keeping our staff as safe as possible. Other than that, does anyone have any COVID-related questions? No? Hearing none, and
I have
go ahead.
Question about testing. I saw that emergency staff are available for more testing. Do they distribute it to you guys, or how does that work?
It's not, no, I mean, we don't have any of the testing, but first responders do have priority when it comes to testing. So if they do go into a facility and they want to get tested, then they're basically bumped to the top of the line. But with the community-wide testing now that's still going on at the Alliant Energy Center, which again, Dane County Emergency Management is really pushing as many people that they can to get through that testing. Those of you that pay attention to the dashboard have seen that the numbers seem to be getting bigger, but that's because we're testing more people. But the percentages is what we're worried about, and that's actually getting lower on a daily basis. It kind of peaked last week, but again, over the weekend it dropped down to 2%. So we're still following the right guidelines when it comes to phase 1 and then moving on into phase 2. And then just to mirror what Matt said with Trustee Lundberg's comment about getting back into face-to-face, I would just be mindful of what those phases are for and how they are set up. We may want to wait to go into face-to-face meetings until we at least move into phase 2, if not phase 3.
This is Sarah. I just want to, if I could just add that while the percentage of tests is going down, the number of people that are needing to be hospitalized is on the very steep increase. So while, yes, we're doing what we need to do, we've had the most positives on Friday or Saturday that we had since the pandemic started. And we were at, I don't want to say the number on the recorded meeting, but a really high, the numbers of people needing to be hospitalized and be in the ICU is increasing. So I just put that out there that it's not, there are more cases and more people are being hospitalized as we open up.
Yeah, COVID-19 isn't done yet. I mean, it's still a pretty serious pandemic that we're still dealing with. The nice thing is the research and the science is getting better when it comes to it. So we're getting better data. We're getting more data, and it's just it's making more sense, and we're doing what we should be doing. But again, we're not out of the woods yet. Just because we've gone into phase 1 doesn't mean that we can't fall back into it if we get these spikes. So we still need to be doing what we're doing, wearing masks when you can, the social distancing, and just keeping yourself healthy and washing your hands when you need to.
Okay, then thanks, Matt. We'll move on to JJ.
Not much that hasn't been said. So far, so good. Keeping our same practices in place. We opened up too. I think we've had even less visitors than PD, but that's all right.
I had a question. When aren't we supposed to go to monthly water or sewer bills at any point here?
Someday, yes. I could go on for a while on the challenges involved in that. Really long story short, at the earliest, it would be next year. You'd have to be a part of a full rate case. But there's even more to it than that.
Well, that's probably helpful in this during this pandemic, so that people aren't going to Village Hall monthly. Then it's just every 3 months until they learn about the online payment. So,
yes.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, Sean, you have anything else to say or share?
I'm muted. That's just how JJ likes me. Just a quick thing. We did get a supply of a chemical this past week, which will give us a 21-day barrier for anything that is touched. So we also are in the process of purchasing a $1,000 sprayer. It's an electromagnetic sprayer, which is something that we will use at Village Hall and all of our buildings, as well as our parks and playgrounds. Electromagnetic sprayer, for those of you that don't know it, it just puts a charge in the chemical and allows it to wrap around things. So once we can get that taken care of, we can go through and do the entire boardroom, carpeting, the whole 9 yards, and theoretically be in good shape for better part of the month. That's all I have.
Any questions for Sean? All right, then we'll move on to communication miscellaneous business. First thing there is consider the approval of vouchers. Any questions or comments with that?
I have a couple of questions under Boucher, Siegel, and Kleminski. It was my understanding that we were going to bill TDS and Alliant, but we weren't going to pay them until we got paid. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, we had a deposit for both of them of the amount that I paid Boucher. So anything over that, we will bill TDS and Alliant, but the amount of the deposit that was remaining that they had already paid went to cover what charges Boucher had.
Okay. All right. Second question was general engineering, April building inspections, $130,845. That's a lot of building inspections.
Give me 1 second, Troy. I'm just pulling up the spreadsheet.
Yeah, no problem. I just thought it seemed like a really high number, that's all.
Troy, what page are you looking at?
Let me scroll down here. I am looking at page 4.
I think that's likely the new school.
Yeah.
And a lot of the school had a lot of other remodeling in their the other elementary schools. But I'll wait for that. That's my best guess. But Lisa is looking at it.
Yep. So the new school, which is the project cost is over $30 million. So the building inspection alone on that was $150,000. And they also had, let's see here. They had the two units for Craig Frank, and each of those were $1.2 million. So that was $17,000 in building permit fees as well in April. And then we had, oh, sorry, those are in May. We also had, no new residential. So it was basically driven by those commercial projects.
So the school, I'm just thinking, there's been dirt moved, but there's really been no construction. Is there going to be further building inspections with that, or is that the entire bill for building inspections, and it just goes through as they go into different phases?
It's the entire bill. They pay it all up front.
Okay. All right. And do we build the school back for any of that, or is that all on us?
They pay for it all up front. So and then we get billed by the inspection service. So
okay.
It's a total break even for the village.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Otherwise,
is there? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second. Too late, Melissa.
I was going to say.
You can have it, Jeff.
Wow. That was close. That was a photo finish or audio finish. So seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion or questions? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Then we'll move next to the to correspondence. I didn't, other than what was mentioned about the cheer and tumbling. I didn't have anything else. Lisa, anything from you?
Nope, that was the only one I had was the cheer and tumbling.
Okay. Then we'll move on to upcoming community events. I think we have the virtual Hot to Trot, I think, coming up. And, of course, graduation for our high school seniors. So congratulations to them this weekend coming up.
I'd like to make a comment. If people know this or not, but Jack, our past village president, I believe is in the hospital with COVID. Yeah, I saw that on Facebook today. So I'll just kind of keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Hope I'm correct about that, but I'm pretty certain that's what I saw. So.
All right. Future agenda items. We'll have certainly the continuation of the prioritization. We'll have the emergency plan. We'll have plan commission items, I'm certain. Anything else, Matt, that you could think of?
I think that's a good start. That'll probably keep us busy for a couple hours at least.
Will keep us all out of trouble for a few hours, yes. All right, then with that, then we'll move on to item 11, and I will, and then we'll have to jump off and jump on to the closed session Zoom. So I'll make the motion then related to the closed session is the Village of Cottage Grove will enter a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories, disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personal problems, or investigation of charges against specific persons, except where par parentheses B applies, and if discussed in public would likely have substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any persons referred to such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, I think I heard Troy and then somebody else jumping in. So then we have a roll call.
Lindbergh,
Aye.
Valencia,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Allen,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Ratcliffe,
Aye.
Vandervelde,
Aye.
All right, we are in closed session, so everybody can jump to that Zoom.